So actually, by the fact that Leah Thomas had been beaten by cis women, it actually debunks that trans women have a competitive edge over cis women. And when we talk about bone density levels, everybody's body chemistry is made differently. There are some cis women that have naturally higher testosterone levels than trans women because of something that we call genetics. When we talk about biology, genetics is biology, and we have to remember that. Some cis women experience transphobia. Iman Khalid is a prime example. Is a prime example. The Algerian boxer who people thought was trans because she looked masculine, something that she can't control. And I think it's very dangerous when we put all women in a position to be tested to prove that they're not trans. And that executive order that Donald Trump signed is nothing more than waste and fraud, in my opinion. You're only signing for 0.002% of the population. You are subjecting all women, whether they're cis or trans, to rigorous tests to prove that they are not trans in order for them to play. And I think that was kind of left out of the conversation when we were thinking about this. And I think we have to bring it to the forefront. It's very, very important. All women can experience transphobia. All women can be affected by transphobia.
All right, guys, so we got to talk about this fascinating debate on Dr. Phil's podcast featuring trans activist Blossom Brown and Dr. Phil. And Dr. Phil is simply going to read off basic facts about biological boys competing in biological girl sports. And this trans activist is not going to accept these facts, right? And again, I think this is why this conversation, really at this point, we should just stop having it, right? Because, there are just certain people that you're not going to be able to convince, right? It doesn't matter what the facts are. It doesn't matter, how logical the argument is. It's just, it doesn't work, right? And I think this is one of these conversations where I'm getting to this point where I'm like, all right, 80% of America have decided how they feel about this. The other 20% refuse to agree with 80%. And honestly, it is what it is, right? And if Democrats want to get on board with it, that's fine too, right? I'm just saying. But again, I think stories like this are exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to, hey, there's just some people out there that just can't be convinced, right? It just can't be convinced. It doesn't matter what the facts say. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this.
Listen, I let you say everything you just said without interrupting you 1 second. And you speak very well and you're very articulate in the things that you say.
Hold on now, Dr. Phil. You better be careful, okay? When you call a black person articulate, some people say that's racist, right? So you can't say stuff like that. You got to be very careful with your language, okay? I'm just saying, calling a black person articulate, again, that can be offensive. That is sarcasm, just in case, anybody did pick up on that. But yeah.
But it just simply is not supported by science. And I don't know that I disagree with you about the number of trans athletes because I'm not sure what you're referring to in terms of the different levels and all the different sports, but there has been a tremendous amount of research done. I don't think it's so much the number of trans athletes because there can be one athlete that can come into a conference like the Big Sky Conference, for example. And when they come into the Big Sky Conference, that one athlete can really erase a lot of really hard work and devotion and sacrifice that dozens, hundreds of women have spent years working on to achieve athletic heights. So it can take one that can really impact a number. And when you look at the science, and listen, it's not a matter of opinion. If you look at the science, the male advantage over females, there are functional differences between biological men and biological women. Men have 57% better grip strength. They have 54% better quad strength. They have 89% more bicep strength. They have 90% more upper body strength. They have 33% higher vertical jumps. They have 162% more punching power. If you get into specific sports activities in terms of running and swimming events, In running, they tend to be 12% faster overall. When you translate this into races, if you have a 12% difference between overall trans athletes, here are some examples to demonstrate the male sports performance advantage over a woman. A man would finish a 3,000 meter track race about a minute faster. A 100-meter swim, a man would be about 5.7 seconds faster. A 200-meter swim, about 11.5 seconds faster. A 800-meter swim, a minute faster. So when you look at those things, these are races that are usually determined by tenths or hundredths of a second. So how do you answer that, Blossom?
Now, I just want to note, right, before this person gets into what they're going to say to Dr. Phil. But clearly, this person was not listening to Dr. Phil while Dr. Phil was making his argument, because before Dr. Phil could even form a sentence, right, a complete sentence to articulate his thoughts, you had this individual, there was head shaking, right, shaking the head, basically disagreeing before Dr. Phil could even complete a sentence, right? So we already know this individual is not listening. Right? The facts don't really matter that much. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it's about feelings, right? It's about, hey, well, I feel like that is fair. But there are no actual real facts to back it up, right? It's just feelings. But Dr. Phil clearly outlined the differences, okay? Scientific studies, scientific research showing the differences, the physical differences between men and women, okay? Biological men, biological women, males and females in sports. Okay. And the most important part about that is that even if somebody is taking hormones or whatever, right, to transition, a vast majority of those differences do not go away, right, in regards to the average performance between men and women, right? And that's what it's all about. And that's a concept that I think that a lot of people are just not grasping, right? The 20% are not grasping the fact that even with hormones, okay, and transitioning, those advantages do not go away, right? They do not go away. They're still very significant, okay? And they're more significant between trans women and biological women than a biological woman who's genetically gifted versus the average biological woman. That's what, again, these activists don't understand.
Absolutely. Respectfully, Dr. Phil, I'm going to need you to have several seats. Let's be clear. Trans women, again, are women. What you're showing me are male statistics, and trans women are not males. Everything that I said can actually be proven. It's scientifically proven, because, again, it's almost like you're trying to call trans women men, and that is not what trans women are. Trans women work just as hard as cis women to compete. And when we talk about bone density levels, again, there are some women who are stronger and have faster agility than trans women. It is a case by case basis. I don't know why you're trying to group a group of trans people into one ideology that is false. It sounds like conservative propaganda. And I think you have drunk the Kool-Aid and have gotten lost in the sauce. I'm sorry, Dr. Phil. I'm going to disagree with you. And I think that the statistics that you've shown me prove nothing when it comes to trans women. Get up there and show me statistics specifically with trans women and cis women, and then we can revisit this conversation. Otherwise, I think you're being biased. I think that it is baloney and propaganda, and I think it needs to be fixed.
Okay, let me.
Wow. I'm speechless. I'm speechless. This is exactly what I'm talking about. There's nothing that can be said that's going to change this person's mind, right? That's just the honest to God truth. So it's like a waste of time to even have a conversation like this, because there are just some things that we're just not going to find agreement on, right? And that's just the reality of the situation. That's just the reality of the situation, okay? Again, 80% of American people agree on this issue. I think at this point, the 20%, if they want to believe what they want to believe, fine, right? Fine, believe what you want to believe. But again, there is no convincing people who you have a disagreement with, even when it comes to, again, just basic things. Like, for example, whether or not trans women are males, right? Okay, biological boys, right? Biological men. That is a fact, right? Like, male, like in female, the definitions of those terms, like that refers to sex, right? That refers to biological sex. Okay. I get the whole left wing argument about how gender is a social construction, which I disagree with, because even if you want to argue it's a social construction, the reason why it is socially organized the way it is because of biology, right? All of it is because of biology. But regardless, that's not what male and female refer to, right? Male and female are strictly scientific. It's strictly about sex, biological sex. And again, this individual believes that trans women are not males, right? AKA they're not biologically male. So if there's no agreement on something as basic as that, then again, I'm trying to figure out exactly how do you come to an agreement, right? How do you have an argument with a person that doesn't believe that trans women are males? I'm just saying, right? That is my point.
Let me respond to that. Listen, I welcome everything you're saying. I want you to have your opportunity to speak out. You absolutely. That doesn't offend me at all. I have you here because I want you to have your say and challenge everything. So you're not offending me in the least. I want you to speak up. So I want people to hear both sides of this. And Lene, you can speak out as well. But I want to say one thing. I think trans athletes should absolutely be allowed to compete. Listen, I grew up as an athlete, but for being in team sports and being able to compete, I'd have been in a lot of trouble. I'd have been lost. I don't think trans athletes should be denied the wonderful world of athletics and competition. The question is, where should they compete and who should they compete against? Now, Blossom is saying, look, there may be differences between biological men and biological women, but we're talking about transgender athletes, not male athletes competing against female athletes. Blossom, you'd give me that biological male athletes versus biological female athletes, of course, that's not fair. But you're saying that's not what you're talking about. You're talking about transgenders that have gone through a lot of hormonal suppression therapy, testosterone blockers for years, sometimes a minimum of 2, according to the NCAA now, and some for much longer than that, right? And you're saying, okay, let's talk about those comparisons. And I do want to talk about those because Dr. Carol Hooven from Harvard University, and she wasn't talking about her own, and she is very much supportive of the transgender population, across the board. She did a meta-analysis of like 50 different studies looking at hormone suppression therapy and testosterone blockers. And the conclusion of looking at over 50 studies was that after testosterone blockers, there's only about a 5 to 10% drop in muscle mass, and that there's no evidence whatsoever that these advantages reduce to the extent that it would match a female-bodied person. And the reason is that trans women who block testosterone do not remove initial male advantages. It doesn't change wingspan. It doesn't change post-pubescent.
What is there to shake your head over? What is this person shaking their head over? I mean, I don't understand. I don't get it. Everything he's saying is factual, but this person's shaking their head. I don't really understand it. I don't get it. But again, this is what I'm talking about. It's very simple. Even if an athlete, a trans athlete, takes hormones, it doesn't make up for the biological advantages that they were born with, right? It doesn't make up for it. Okay, if they go through puberty, then those advantages are permanent. Yes, if you take hormones, you will lose some advantages, but you still retain a vast majority of them. And with those advantages, on average, a trans athlete is going to have a significant advantage over biological women, biological girls in sports, even more so than genetically gifted girls have over the average woman or the average girl in sports, right? This is not a hard concept to grasp. Like, this is a very simple concept to grasp. But like I said, when you can't agree on very basic things, okay, in a conversation like this, I just don't see how you can come to some agreement, right? Or some type of compromise or any real, understanding, okay?
Male's anatomy, and there are only slight changes. At the most, you start with a difference of about 40% across the board in upper body, 45% in lean muscle mass, 33% in lower body muscle mass, 83% in tendon resistance, 30% in cardiac output. The most you're going to get is a 10% reduction, and that doesn't even almost get to a level playing field. So even with hormone therapy and testosterone blockers, particularly post-pubescent, it doesn't level the playing field at all. So what you're saying is not supported by the science. The advantages of height, wingspan, bone strength, larger heart, and greater lung volume, the only thing that seems to equate is hemoglobin. Other than that, it just simply doesn't equate.
I disagree, Dr. Phil, because again, I'm questioning for the trans people that they studied, when there's only less than 10 trans athletes in the NCAA. Like, that is what I really want to know. It sounds like there's a lot of bias in this research.
Wow.
And I would actually like to study up on it myself and really figure out what's going on here. I think it's very dangerous to try to weaponize these statistics against trans women who are trying to play in sports, mainly because of safety concerns. And I think we got to be really clear. There is a lot more research that still needs to be done.
But I think you should study Dr. Hooven's.
Okay, I think we got it, right? We got the gist of this, okay? This transgender individual basically claimed that there's no scientific evidence to back up the fact that biological boys have an advantage over biological girls in sports. Dr. Phil shows the statistics, okay, proving that on average, biological boys do in fact have significant advantages over biological girls in sports. The transgender individual gets upset, starts basically personally insulting Dr. Phil, okay, as a conservative propagandist, right? And then says, well, I want to see the statistics on trans athletes, right? Trans athletes specifically versus biological girls. And Dr. Phil shows the trans athlete exactly what they're looking for, and the trans athlete says, well, I don't believe it, right? I don't believe the facts, right? I don't believe the studies, okay? He showed this individual a meta-analysis, right? Which is a study of studies, right? He didn't cherry pick one study, okay? He showed a study of studies, okay, to prove his point, and the transgender activist still said, nah, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. It's propaganda, right? It's biased because it doesn't agree with my conclusion, right? It doesn't agree with what I want it to say, so therefore it can't be real, right? It can't be real, and this is what I'm talking about. This is not what I'm talking about. It's like, okay, what's the point of having a conversation about a topic like this with somebody that doesn't want to believe the facts, right? They don't want to believe the studies, okay? I mean, I get people saying, okay, well, I believe that there may be some bias in the studies, but you have to demonstrate that, right? That's something where you have to come back with counter studies to show that, okay, my point is correct, right? That there is actual debate, but that's not what this individual is doing. This individual is just saying, no, I don't agree with it, right? I don't like it. Therefore, it just can't be true, right? It must be some bigotry going on here, right? It has to be bigotry. And again, I'm just saying, it's this conversation, I think, again, 80% of American people have decided. I don't know why we're still even having it at this point, because I think everybody's kind of decided what they want to believe about this. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.